when Martin once again abandoned me to get back together with Luna. I finally felt utterly exhausted. As I was leaving, he said, "Clara, go find yourself a boyfriend. I won't be coming back to you again." I smiled and nodded. All right. He thought that no matter how many times he turned back, I would always be there waiting. But later, when he and Luna broke up again and came looking for me, he happened to witness me downstairs, locked in a passionate kiss with my boyfriend. The night was deep and intoxicating, and Martin saw that the girl who once spoke to him in the softest voice was now gently coaxing another man. "Victor, don't be jealous, okay? I haven't liked him for a long time." Chapter 01. I was about to make a wish when Martin got distracted for the third time. Absent-mindedly, he took out his phone, unlocked it, locked it again, and repeated the process multiple times. Then, all of a sudden, his screen lit up with an incoming message. His furrowed brows instantly relaxed. As everyone was singing the birthday song for me, Martin Liu got up and left the room without hesitation. The song trailed off awkwardly. The girl beside me nudged me with concern. "Clara, are you okay?" I forced a bitter smile. What could possibly be wrong? After so many years, I had long grown used to scenes like this. The people in the private room had already started whispering. "I just saw on Instagram Luna came back 2 days ago. Did Martin pick her up from the airport?" "Of course. He cherishes her more than anything. Everyone knows that. Keep your voice down. Don't let Clara hear." So what if she hears? A second choice should know their place. Now that the real one is back, she doesn't stand a chance. As the murmurs grew louder, the door to the private room opened from the outside. Martin had returned, with Luna by his side. Both were dressed in black cashmere coats. Martin, tall and handsome. Luna, slim, stunning, and elegant. A picture-perfect couple. The crowd immediately swarmed around them, enthusiastically greeting them with, "Martin bro," and "Luna sis." I stood aside, knowing better than to step forward. Then Martin called my name, "Clara." The room fell into sudden silence. Everyone turned to look at me, the one who, at least in name, was still Martin's girlfriend. Luna also turned to look at me. Then, clearly displeased, she flung Martin's hand away. Chapter 02. Martin sighed helplessly, shaking his head with a mix of indulgence and exasperation. He whispered something softly to Luna, coaxing her until she finally smiled. Only then did he walk over to me. "Clara, I need to talk to you." I lifted my gaze to him. After a moment, I asked gently, "Can it wait until I finish cutting the cake?" Martin avoided my eyes. "Clara, all right." I set down the knife and fork, waiting for him to speak. "You know that I've always had Luna in my heart." As he spoke, he frowned slightly, looking at me. "Besides, you're really not my type. These days with you have been pretty dull. Are you breaking up with me?" Martin nodded without hesitation. "Clara, go find yourself a boyfriend. I won't be coming back to you again." This wasn't the first time he had said something like this to me, but before, whenever he said it, I would always stubbornly shake my head. This time, however, I simply smiled and nodded. "All right." Martin frowned slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but Luna had already lost her patience. "Martin, are you done? How long does it take to break up with someone?" And just like that, he said nothing more. He turned, wrapped an arm around Luna, and walked away. I clenched my hands tightly, my nails digging deep into my palms, but I felt no pain. In the end, I couldn't stop myself from lifting my gaze, watching his retreating figure. Each step was firm, decisive. I counted 11 steps. By the time he took the 11th step and disappeared through the door, it felt like I had finally, truly let go. As soon as Martin left, the rest of the crowd slowly dispersed. I stared at the cake in front of me, cut a slice, and placed it on a plate. Then I opened a bottle of wine. In the end, I didn't take a single bite of the cake, but I finished the entire bottle of wine. Slipping on my coat, I walked out of the room. Not far away, fireworks lit up the night sky. I stopped for a moment to watch. As the sky burst into brilliant colors, I caught sight of Martin and Luna. She was breathtakingly beautiful, her smile dazzling, and Martin held her tightly, lowering his head to press a tender kiss to her forehead. Today was my birthday, but these fireworks were never meant for me. I let out a bitter laugh, turned around, and stumbled forward. On my way, a drunken man stepped into my path, blocking me. "Hey, sweetheart, want to have some fun with me?" I pushed him away a few times, but he wouldn't budge. Panic started rising in my chest. Here, besides Martin, I knew no one. But, should I ask Martin for help? Before I could react, Martin had already disappeared into the crowd with Luna. The man's grip tightened around my wrist, pulling me toward him. I struggled, but the alcohol had drained all my strength. Just as his hand was about to land on my waist, through the darkness, I saw a familiar figure. Victor stood under the streetlights, wearing a dark gray knee-length coat. A cigarette rested between his fingers as he spoke on the phone. The ember of the cigarette flickered in the night, illuminating his long, elegant fingers. The shadows cast across his sharp, sculpted features made him look like a god carved from jade, striking and untouchable. Without thinking, I called out desperately, "Dr. Victor." Chapter 03. When Victor's gaze fell on me. His deep, cold eyes were like frozen stars in the night, devoid of warmth, devoid of emotion. But after a brief hesitation, he hung up the phone and crushed his cigarette underfoot. Then, he walked toward me. The two drunk men must have noticed that he was someone powerful, someone untouchable. They let go of me without a word and slinked away. But the moment they released me, my legs gave out. Victor reached out and steadied me. "Stand properly." I whispered a thank you, trying to stabilize myself, but I was still swaying, nearly stumbling several times. Victor frowned slightly and held me up again. "Where's Martin? He's not with you?" "We broke up." He let out a short chuckle, or maybe I imagined it. "Haven't you two broken up every other week?" I lowered my gaze, staring at my feet. That bitter ache spread from my chest to my throat. When I spoke again, my voice was hoarse. "This time, it's real. We won't be getting back together." Victor didn't seem the least bit interested in my explanation. He glanced at his watch and said flatly, "Can you get home by yourself? My stomach hurts. Your ulcer just healed. You shouldn't be drinking so much. But today is my birthday." I lifted my slightly reddened eyes and looked at him. "Dr. Victor, I only drank because I was feeling awful." Victor said nothing, but his gaze softened, just slightly. "I'll take you home." "I don't want to go home." Victor glanced at me, his eyes darkening slightly. "Then what do you want to do?" "Dr. Victor, I'm listening. It's my birthday. I don't want to be alone tonight." Victor remained silent for a few seconds before he finally spoke. "Get in the car. I'm not going home." Victor gripped the steering wheel with one hand and glanced at me. "I know. To be precise, by the time we reached the underground parking lot, we were already kissing. It started when he leaned over to unbuckle my seatbelt. As he turned, his high-bridged nose accidentally brushed against my hair. "Dr. Victor." My reaction was dulled by the alcohol. I looked up at him, dazed, forgetting to pull away. Victor held my gaze. He made no effort to move away either. His eyes grew hotter and hotter, setting my skin ablaze. I don't remember who kissed who first. By the time I realized what was happening, Victor had already cupped the back of my head and deepened the kiss. I had dated Martin for nearly a year, breaking up and making up countless times. He had held my hand. He had kissed me, but maybe because he never truly liked me. Even his kisses were fleeting, barely more than a brush of the lips. But Victor kissed deeply, so deep that I was left breathless. Only when I was on the verge of suffocating did he finally let me go. In the dim light of the car, he lowered his head, resting his forehead against mine. "Clara, you're supposed to close your eyes when you kiss." "Why?" Victor kissed me again. "Because when you look at me like that, I won't be able to hold back until we get home." This time, his kiss was slow, lingering, intoxicating. A soft hum slipped from my lips. I lifted my hands, threading my fingers through his thick, dark hair. "Victor, don't rush. We have all night." I didn't want to be someone's pathetic second choice anymore. I didn't want to be picked up and discarded at will. I knew how hard it was to completely let go of someone I had truly loved, so I refused to leave myself any way back. I refused to turn around. After tonight, Martin and I would be impossible. Maybe it was all the years of repression. Maybe this rare moment of drunken indulgence was my way of taking it to the extreme. Chapter 04. Victor carried me into the bedroom. As he stood by the bed, unbuttoning his shirt, he suddenly stopped, leaning over. He looked at me. Clara, if you regret this now. I reached up, hooking my arms around his neck. Dr. Victor, do doctors ever think about running away at the last moment? Victor didn't say another word, but in those obsidian-like eyes of his, fire ignited. My wrists were pinned above my head as he kissed me, deep and commanding. Surgeons always have strong, skillful hands, and Victor was undoubtedly one of the best. As I floated into euphoria, a ridiculous thought popped into my head. With hands like his, he could probably catch even the slipperiest of fish with ease. Otherwise, why was it that right now, he had caught his little fish so precisely? Clara. His scorching kisses fell again as Victor nibbled at my earlobe. His voice husky. Say my name, Clara. I whimpered softly. Victor. Victor. I can't take it. His kisses rained down on my lips like a storm. Good girl. I'll give you everything. By midnight, rain had begun to fall outside the terrace. The delicate flowers were drenched in the early winter rain, and inside the room, a different kind of storm unfolded, just as intense and intoxicating. But after the passion, one of us was left with complicated emotions. Victor, craving a cigarette, pulled one out but never lit it. He hadn't expected this. Clara had been in an on-again, off-again relationship with Martin for 3 years. And yet, she had never once crossed that line with him. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was already pouring into the room. Victor Sue had the day off today. He had already prepared breakfast. After washing up, I sat at the dining table. As he handed me a cup of warm milk, I hesitated before asking, Dr. Victor, can I take a picture? 10 minutes ago, someone had sent me a screenshot. Last night, Martin had posted on Instagram after all the wandering. It's still you. The picture attached was of him and Luna, fingers intertwined under the fireworks. Someone had apparently asked about me in the comments. Martin had replied, don't mention her again. Luna wouldn't like it. A picture of what? Victor sliced a piece of bread and placed it on my plate. The same hands that usually held a scalpel were now holding a knife and fork. Each finger was like polished jade, long, steady, powerful. A flash of last night crossed my mind. These very hands, which seemed so refined and restrained in the daylight, had been nothing short of sinful in the dark. And those words he whispered in my ear at the peak of passion, I didn't even dare to recall them. I turned my face away, coughing lightly. I want to take a picture of your hands. Victor didn't reply, but after setting the bread down, he didn't withdraw his hand either. I slowly took out my phone, snapped a picture, and then asked, can I post it on Instagram? Victor peeled an egg unhurriedly. I'm single. He glanced at me and handed me the egg. Do as you please. Chapter 05. I posted an Instagram update. Bread always seems to taste better when it's cut by a pair of beautiful hands. The picture? Victor's hands, so beautiful they seemed almost unfair to the rest of the world. Within seconds, it was like dropping cold water into boiling oil. My WeChat exploded. In one of Martin's friend groups, someone had already screenshotted my Instagram post. Is this real, or did she Photoshop it? Not gonna lie, those hands do look damn good. Never thought Clara had it in her. She probably just found a random photo online to piss off Martin. Martin, childish. Martin, what do you think? What if it's real? Clara's not bad-looking, fair skin, soft features, the kind of girl people want to protect. Martin, she wouldn't dare. You never know. Even the meekest person has their breaking point. Didn't Daniel say the same thing back then? Daniel, I sure did. Marco, Martin, if Clara really started dating someone, would it bother you? Martin, I said. She wouldn't dare. Yeah, because if she did, she wouldn't even be a backup option anymore. Martin, tell her to quit the games. She's not Luna. I don't fall for that kind of crap. After replying, Martin tossed his phone aside and lit a cigarette. What a stupid move. Clara. I skimmed through the flood of messages on WeChat. Most were people prying about my Instagram post, asking what it meant. I didn't bother responding. That afternoon, Victor got called in for an unexpected surgery. Stay home and rest. I'll be back for dinner. He had already changed and was grabbing his car keys when I quickly followed him out. I want to stop by my restaurant. Victor glanced at me as he slipped on his shoes. Something wrong? I pressed my lips together, avoiding his gaze. Martin still has some things there. I want to pack them up and have his assistant pick them up. Victor's tone remained indifferent. All right. I'll drive you. Victor. There's nothing between us anymore. I regretted saying it the moment the words left my lips. Honestly, Victor probably only brought me home out of curiosity. I didn't owe him an explanation. I know. Victor turned back to look at me, his expression surprisingly gentle. I'll pick you up after work. After dropping me off at my restaurant, Victor headed to the hospital. I started gathering Martin's belongings. I owned a small private dining restaurant. At one point, I had set aside a private room just for him. Sometimes he'd entertain close friends there. Occasionally, he'd even stay overnight. But we never actually lived together. He had held me. He had kissed me. Once, when he was drunk, we almost slept together. But at the last moment, I heard him mumble Luna's name. And just like that, I sobered up instantly. The body doesn't lie. Desire can never be faked. Maybe that was the moment I truly woke up from this ridiculous, messy love. Martin didn't love me. He never even liked me, not even a little. I packed his things neatly, then called his assistant. Han, could you come by when you have a moment? Please pick up Mr. Liu's belongings. Miss Clara, please hold on a moment. All right. A few minutes later, Han called back. Miss Clara, Mr. Liu said to leave his things there. He said that you're still friends and that he'll continue looking after your business. That won't be necessary. I smiled. You should still come pick them up. No need for unnecessary complications. Miss Clara, I'm waiting at the restaurant now. If you don't come, I'll just have them sent over. With that, I hung up the phone. Chapter 06. Han hesitated for a moment. Mr. Liu, what do you think? Martin's expression darkened slightly. In the past 3 years, this was the first time something like this had happened. First, Clara posted a ridiculous, out-of-nowhere Instagram update. Then, she suddenly wanted to clear out all his belongings. It really seemed like she was being serious this time. But Martin knew Clara better than anyone. She loved him unconditionally. There was no way she could actually like another man. This was just another petty trick, a childish act of jealousy. In the past, Clara had been too naive to play these kinds of games. Clearly, someone had been coaching her. Martin found it laughable. Clara probably didn't even realize. For a girl as simple-minded as her, trying to play mind games was full of flaws. And frankly, he didn't appreciate her making a scene like this. The only thing he ever liked about her was how obedient and well-behaved she used to be. Martin's face grew cold. Go, bring everything back. Are you sure, Mr. Liu? Han was surprised. Martin nodded. Of course. And tell her, I won't be going to her restaurant anymore. When Han came to collect the luggage, he relayed Martin's message. I wasn't surprised. Luna had returned to stay for good this time. It was only natural that things between them were heading in the right direction. Even if I meant nothing to Martin, I still carried the title of ex-girlfriend. Cutting ties completely was the most logical step. Han, please also pass a message to Mr. Liu. I smiled. Thank him for supporting my business these past few years. Han hesitated. Miss Clara, actually, Mr. Liu didn't mean it that way. Han, I have to go to the market. Still smiling, I subtly made it clear that our conversation was over. Left with no choice, Han and the driver loaded the 2 suitcases into the car and left. After getting into the car, Han called Martin. Mr. Liu, where should we send your things? What did she say? Miss Clara said she's very grateful for all the support you've given her business. And? Han hesitated. That's it. Martin didn't respond. A few seconds later, the call suddenly disconnected. Chapter 07. On the 3rd day, the restaurant received a large reservation, 2 private rooms booked for a gathering. At 6 in the evening, Victor stopped by after work. He was wearing a gray trench coat, standing tall and sharp, his features striking as ever. But unlike that night, the cold detachment in his expression had softened considerably. Even the way he looked at me carried a certain warmth. "Tonight will be a bit busy. I might not have time for you." "That's fine. I'll just wait for you in the room." "What do you want to eat?" "I'll have whatever you're having." "That won't do. It's your first time at my restaurant." I thought for a moment and instructed the kitchen to prepare a light meal of porridge and side dishes. "There's a private lounge here. I'll take you there first. They'll bring your food shortly." But Victor didn't follow me. He leaned against the bar, looking at me with a calm, unreadable gaze. I hesitated. "What's wrong?" Victor let out a low chuckle. "I don't go into other people's rooms." I froze, then realized what he meant. "Don't overthink it. The old room was converted into a private dining suite. The lounge is just for my friends." Victor's lips curled slightly. "All right." Then, just as he finished speaking, a cold voice sounded from behind us. "Move aside." Instinctively, I pulled Victor aside to clear the way, only to see Martin and Luna. Martin's gaze swept over me indifferently before landing on my hand, still gripping Victor's sleeve. His eyes darkened. Luna smirked at me, raising an eyebrow as if in challenge. "Clara, long time no see." I nodded but didn't respond. Martin withdrew his gaze, pulled Luna close, and walked inside without looking at me again. Not even once. Not until they had disappeared from sight. "Clara." Victor took my hand. "Show me the way. I don't know where to go." I nodded, letting him hold my hand. I led him to the lounge, preparing to leave when I hesitated. "Stay here and rest. If I have time later, I'll have dinner with you." But Victor caught my wrist and pulled me into his arms. "You have chefs and staff. You don't need to do everything yourself." "Victor." Before I could finish, he lowered his head and kissed me, just like that night, deep and overwhelming. "Not here. We don't have." Panicked, I tried to push him away, but Victor simply lifted me onto the table. Maybe it was just my imagination, but he felt like a completely different person. Wild. "Clara, I want you here." With practiced ease, he pulled his shirt loose and wedged himself between my legs, kissing me fiercely again. "That night, you asked me to stay with you." "I did." "Tonight, I want you to stay with me." "But we don't have protection." "I could get pregnant. Then we'll keep it." "Victor, are you crazy?" He unfastened his belt slowly, gripping my wrists and pulling me toward him. "Then just think of me as crazy." Outside the window, the sky had turned a deep shade of night. The wind howled past, rattling against the glass. I bit my finger, trying to suppress my voice, but Victor removed my hand and held it firmly in his. His lips brushed against my neck. "Clara, don't hold back. People might hear. Let them." With those words, he pressed in deeper, and my voice shattered. Through the window, the city lights flickered in the distance. Beyond those lights, laughter and clinking glasses filled the banquet hall, and in the center of that lively gathering was Martin. How absurd. Yet there was something exhilarating about it. I wrapped my arms tightly around Victor. "Victor, kiss me." Obediently, he lowered his head and sealed my lips with his. When I stepped out of the room, the heat still lingered at the back of my neck. I was hurrying toward the kitchen when Martin's voice suddenly rang out from behind me. "That guy from your Instagram, was that him?" I turned around in surprise. He stood there, cigarette in hand, his face expressionless, the cold night wind swirling around him. I instinctively wanted to shake my head, but before I could, Martin let out a scornful laugh. "Clara, stop wasting your time." His cigarette-wielding fingers reached toward my face, but I turned away before he could touch me. His voice was low, smooth, almost hypnotic, yet sharp enough to cut deep. "Using another man just to get a reaction out of me? Clara, you're not even good at this. You're not cute when you play these little games." I couldn't help but laugh. Then, shaking my head, I sighed. "Martin, I'm really not that childish." Maybe he would never understand. Even now, standing there, so confident, so sure of himself, believing I would always be his backup, always waiting for him. He didn't know. He didn't know that I had already been with another man, had already shared the kind of intimacy with someone else that I never had with him. But why not? Who really needed who in the end? Martin crushed his cigarette underfoot, looking down at me, clearly unconvinced. Believe whatever you want. I didn't bother saying more. I walked past him without another glance, never looking back. Chapter 08. Since that day, Martin never came to my small shop again, but Victor and we still maintained that kind of relationship, growing closer, yet somehow, never truly crossing the final line. Half a month later, when Daniel and Marco arrived at the private club room, they found Martin drinking alone. He had just fought with Luna again, another argument that ended on a sour note. And yet, when Luna had been yelling at him hysterically, refusing to let go of the fight, for some reason, Martin had thought of Clara. She was never like this. She never got angry. As if she had no temper at all, even when he had abandoned her time and time again, always choosing Luna over her. She had never cried or thrown a tantrum, and every time he turned back to find her, she would only ask him, "Martin, have you really thought this through?" Every time she asked, he would pinch her cheek and casually say, "Of course I have. From now on, it's just you, Clara." Then she would blush, her fair skin turning hot and red. If he leaned down to kiss her, she would be so flustered she wouldn't even dare to meet his eyes. Martin suddenly felt irritated. He put down his glass and took out his phone with a frown. It had been half a month since they last saw each other at the shop. Clara had made no contact, no calls, no WeChat messages, as if she had completely erased herself from his world. Daniel sat on the couch across from him, drinking alone. Martin didn't respond. Daniel poured himself a glass of liquor, leaning back lazily. He had just heard the news a few days ago. Eva was pregnant, and Alex was over the moon. Daniel himself wasn't sure how he felt. She was happy, and he wanted her to be happy. But there was still a lingering bitterness, because that happiness hadn't come from him. "Martin, do you really feel nothing for Clara? She's ugly and dumb. How could I possibly feel anything for her? You say that, but for the past 3 years, besides Luna, she was the only other woman in your life." Martin poured another drink. "So what? I only went after her to piss off Luna." "Martin, don't be like me and Daniel," Marco suddenly said, his tone turning serious. "Sometimes, the person involved is the last to realize the truth. Martin, maybe you don't even realize it yourself, but Clara isn't as insignificant to you as you think." "Impossible." Martin's brows furrowed deeply. "She's not my type at all." Marco chuckled and clinked his glass with Daniel. "You can't wake someone who refuses to see the truth. Just wait, he's the type that won't believe it until it slaps him in the face." Martin sneered. "I'm nothing like you two. I genuinely don't like Clara. I feel nothing for her. Otherwise, in these past 3 years, I would have slept with her." The moment he finished speaking, the door suddenly swung open from the outside. "Martin, guess who I just saw?" Martin's fingers tightened around his glass. "Who?" "I saw Clara." His tense grip slowly loosened. He set his glass down and leaned back lazily against the couch, his posture relaxed and indifferent. "So what?" Maybe even he didn't realize how different his expression had become from just moments before. Even his voice had lost its previous coldness. Daniel and Marco exchanged a knowing look and shook their heads helplessly. "I asked her if she came here to find you, but she wouldn't admit it." Martin let out a soft chuckle. "Just ignore her. Girls are shy. That's normal. Want me to call her up?" Martin waved his hand. "No way. If she really wanted to see him, she could come up herself. He would never send someone to call her over." Still, he was in a good mood now. If Clara took the initiative to come and lower her head, he wouldn't mind treating her a little nicer. He had almost thought she had grown a spine this time. Who would have thought she couldn't even last half a month? Feeling entertained, Martin called for a round of cards. But as time passed, the door remained silent. He found himself getting distracted, glancing toward the entrance a few times, even messing up a few rounds of the game. One of his friends, noticing, laughed. "You guys keep playing. I'm stepping out for a smoke." A few moments later, the guy returned, but his expression was a little strange. I just saw Clara again. She's sitting downstairs alone. She said she's waiting for someone. Martin threw down his cards, lit a cigarette, and glanced at his watch. It's already 10 at night. Who the hell is she waiting for? No idea. I told her to come up and wait inside, but she refused no matter what. Just kept saying she was waiting for someone. She's got some nerve. Suddenly, even his cigarette tasted dull. Annoyed, he crushed it in the ashtray. I'm going out for some air. Chapter 09. I checked my phone. It was already 10 o'clock. Victor's surgery was probably still ongoing. He had planned to take me out with some friends tonight. But halfway there, he got an urgent call from the hospital. Originally, he estimated it would be done by 8:30. But now, there was still no word from him. I sighed and stood up. I knew that saving lives was his duty as a doctor. But I couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. Even after all these years of being stood up, of being left behind midway, it still hurt. I was never truly immune to it. Clara. Just as I turned to leave, a familiar voice called out from behind me. For a split second, my spine stiffened, but I quickly regained my composure. What are you doing here? Martin strolled toward me leisurely, raising an eyebrow. Meeting a friend, but they had an emergency and couldn't make it. I met his gaze, my voice steady. Martin let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Clara, do you know how stupid you look when you lie? I blinked, then immediately understood. Of course, this was one of Martin's usual haunts. He must have assumed I had come looking for him and was too embarrassed to admit it. But I was too tired to explain, knowing he wouldn't believe me anyway. So, I simply smiled. I'm leaving now, Clara. Martin called my name again. Some things, once, maybe twice, but not a third or fourth time. You're misunderstanding. I really am waiting for a friend. He got called into surgery at the last minute. The guy from your Instagram? Martin's smirk grew colder. Clara, I never knew you had a doctor friend. I met him when I was sick. I looked him in the eye. That night, when I called you at midnight, saying my stomach hurt so badly I couldn't take it anymore, and you hung up on me. Martin's expression shifted. Slowly, his face drained of color. For the first time, there was something almost frantic in his eyes. You were really sick. His voice wavered slightly. I thought you were just jealous of Luna and making up excuses to get my attention. It doesn't matter. It's in the past now. I'm mostly fine. I smiled lightly. It's late. I should go. For some reason, Martin didn't stop me this time, and that was fine. No more entanglements. No unfinished business. This was the best outcome. By the time Victor finished his surgery, it was already 11. I had just arrived back at my restaurant when he called. Clara, I'm driving over to see you now. Victor, you just finished a surgery. You must be exhausted. Get some rest. I broke my promise first. I should apologize in person. Victor. I murmured his name softly. I had always been self-aware. For the past half-month, we had been in this intimate, undefined relationship, but not once had he given me any sort of promise. I knew full well Victor was only interested in me because I was something new. He would never truly love me, just like in those 3 years with Martin. Despite all our ups and downs, I had always known that in his eyes, I was never really his girlfriend. Everyone in their circle was rich, powerful, and dazzling in their own right, and I was just another ordinary person in a sea of billions. If I had any strengths, they were simply that I had a peaceful temperament, that I was good at cooking, and that I could run my small restaurant independently. But that was all. Martin had always loved Luna, the glamorous, dazzling kind of woman, and Victor's type would never be someone like me, either. Back in university, Victor was a legendary figure, the perfect, unattainable senior who was always seen with the most beautiful girl in the English department, a girl so stunning that everyone called them the perfect couple. Rumor had it that she wanted to stay abroad after graduation, while Victor was determined to return home and become a doctor. That was how they parted ways. Since then, Victor had never been in a relationship. He had remained single all these years. I had seen that senior girl twice. She was breathtaking, more beautiful than even the most famous celebrities. Only a woman like that could make Victor fall head over heels and never forget. Clara, what's wrong? Victor's voice pulled me back to the present. He sounded exhausted, his voice hoarse from fatigue, but when he said my name, his tone was gentle. Something pricked at my eyes. I almost teared up. It wasn't a big deal. That night, even though I had been drunk, I had been completely aware. I knew it had only been a fleeting moment, a temporary passion, a love that would never last. Chapter 10. Victor. Let's not see each other again. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. When he finally spoke, his voice was as calm as ever. Clara, whatever it is, let's talk in person. No need. We don't have to meet. Saying it over the phone is enough. I'm already on my way. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Victor, wait for me at your restaurant. Don't go anywhere. It's late. And it's not safe. And with that, he hung up. Panic spread through me like wildfire. I didn't know what I could say to him. I couldn't predict what he would say to me. Those 30 minutes felt endless, yet they disappeared in the blink of an eye. His call came again. Clara, I'm outside. I had planned not to go, not to meet him. Some truths were easier when I kept them to myself. Hearing them out loud was another matter entirely. Sometimes, I really wanted to be an ostrich, to just bury my head in the sand and pretend. But the Beijing winter was so cold. Even through the phone, I could hear the wind howling outside. In the end, I still went to him. I'm sorry for breaking our plans tonight. I'm not angry. You're a doctor. It's your duty. I understand. Then why did you say we shouldn't see each other anymore? That night, it was just an accident. Victor, I won't cling to you because of it. I know you don't like me. So in your eyes, I'm the kind of man who brings random women home? No, I didn't mean it like that, I rushed to explain. I thought your Instagram post the next day meant you were making our relationship official. He paused. Guess I was overthinking it. Victor? My eyes widened in surprise. So, you don't like me, do you, Clara? Did Martin come looking for you again? You still can't forget him, can you? That Instagram post, you only posted it to get a reaction from him. His voice remained calm from beginning to end. There was no anger, no emotion, and yet, a strange thought popped into my head. Was he jealous? Jealous of Martin? But I had never thought of it that way. And on my birthday that night, I had already let go of Martin completely. I had stopped loving him. Victor took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. He looked exhausted after hours of surgery. He had driven straight here. His eyes were bloodshot. He hadn't even changed out of his white coat. The winter wind howled around him, but he stood in front of me, dressed too lightly for the cold. Even if I were blind, I could tell. Victor didn't feel nothing for me. But why? Why would he care about me? I was just an ordinary girl. Clara. Victor looked at me. Maybe it was because his eyes were red from exhaustion. But for the first time, he looked vulnerable. You can't do this to me. You can't just leave me after everything. You can't run away from this. I didn't. You said we shouldn't see each other anymore. Victor, I was only worried I'd be a burden to you. I didn't want you to think I'd cling to you just because of that one night. So you don't love Martin anymore? And that Instagram post, it wasn't to provoke him? I wanted to laugh, but instead, my eyes stung with unshed tears. The night was deep and quiet. Victor stood in the wind, shielding me from the biting cold. I looked up, and in his eyes, reflected in the dark, was only me. Why was it him that night? Maybe because, on that long ago night when I was in unbearable pain, when I thought I might actually die, it was his warm hand that reached out to me. So when I saw him again, something inside me just knew he would save me again. Now, once again, he was standing before me, reaching out his hand. Maybe this time, I shouldn't let it slip away. Even if what he felt for me was small, it was still more than someone who never loved me at all. Victor, stop being jealous, all right? I stopped loving him a long time ago, before I could even finish. Victor cupped my face and kissed me. Chapter 11. Martin didn't know why he had come looking for Clara. Maybe it was because of the huge fight with Luna, one so exhausting that he found himself thinking about ending things for good. Or maybe it was because of the doctor Clara had mentioned. Something about him had stirred an uneasy feeling inside Martin. And so, without thinking, he found himself driving to Clara's restaurant in the middle of the night. But no one else showed up. She had been lying. There was no friend gathering. She had come looking for him. She wanted to get back together. And this time, more than ever, he wanted it too. But just as he was about to go inside, a car pulled up outside Clara's restaurant. And when Victor stepped out, Martin felt his heartbeat come to a sudden stop. All this time, he had assumed the doctor was just some average man. After all, Clara was just an ordinary girl. How exceptional could a man be if he liked someone like her? But he never expected it to be that man, the one from Clara's restaurant that night. The moment Martin had first seen him, something in his gut had told him to take note. But his arrogance had dismissed it. A man like that, refined, composed. Why would he be interested in Clara? But why wouldn't he? After all, wasn't he also here, in the dead of night, driving to see her? Through the years, Clara had already become a part of him. So now that she had finally, truly let him go, he felt it. The discomfort, the unwillingness, the quiet, suffocating sense of loss. Just as Daniel had said, he had been blind to the truth all along. He had always assumed he didn't like Clara, and he had always believed Clara would never stop loving him. That no matter what, as long as he turned back, she would always be there, waiting for him, and every single time, she had proven him right. So he had been reckless, unrestrained, confident that he would never lose her. Until now, he stood there, frozen, as Clara and Victor kissed. A deep, passionate kiss. Neither of them wanting to pull away. He watched as Victor followed Clara home. He watched as the lights inside her apartment stayed on for a long time. And then, finally, turned off. And in that endless darkness, Martin heard it. The sound of something shattering inside him. Chapter 12. Martin's phone was ringing, buzzing, relentlessly. Like the person on the other end wouldn't stop until he picked up. He glanced at the name flashing on the screen, then let out a bitter laugh, and answered. Lunita. Martin. Where did you go? They told me you saw Clara tonight. Did you go looking for her? I knew it! You've been lying to me this whole time. You said you didn't like her, but that was just a lie, wasn't it? Martin. If you love her, then why did you come back to me? If you're with me, why are you still thinking about her? What do you take me for? I'm not Clara. Martin. I won't just sit here and let you string me along. I won't wait for you like some fool while you run off to someone else. You're right. Martin finally spoke. Luna's shouting came to an abrupt stop. Martin? You're right. You're not Clara. You were never going to wait for me. So now, at last, you're finally being honest. Martin. Luna's voice wavered. You didn't date anyone in those 3 years? Martin let out a cold laugh. You were always single after we broke up? Always waiting for me? And what about you, Luna? Every time we broke up, didn't you turn around and find Clara? Why is it okay for you to move on instantly, but not for me? But I never hid it. Martin's voice was calm. I was upfront about it. Luna. Yes. I went back to Clara right away, but I never pretended otherwise. And you? Who was it that claimed she had been single for 3 years? Who was it that lied first? You'll never compare to Clara. At least when she loves someone, she gives them everything. And I'm no better. I'm selfish, indecisive, greedy. Luna. We're both just 2 terrible people. Martin. Luna took a deep breath. You really love Clara, don't you? You've always loved her. Every single time you went back to her, you were happy about it, weren't you? Martin tightened his grip on the phone. Had he been that obvious? It was true. Every time he and Luna fought, he rushed to find Clara. He never even waited a full night. Maybe deep down, he was always looking for a reason to fight with Luna, a reason to break up, so that he could go back to Clara, so that he could trap her at his side again. Because when she was there, the emptiness inside him faded. But on her birthday that night, he had fought with Luna again, except that time, it hadn't been a big fight, not bad enough to break up over, so he hadn't gone to Clara. The next day, she posted that Instagram photo. He had been furious, but he pretended not to care. He told his friends Clara was just acting out of jealousy. And then, Clara called Han, told him to pick up Martin's things. At that moment, there had been a flicker of panic in his heart, but he was too arrogant. Even then, he refused to believe Clara was really leaving. He had even thought, childishly, that he would teach her a lesson, scare her a little. And yet, because of that single misstep, there was no turning back. The sound of Luna crying filled his ears. Martin leaned back against his seat, pressing his fingers against his temple. Lunita. His voice was low. Let's not do this anymore. Martin. What are you saying? Martin stared into the darkness. For a long time, he said nothing. Then finally, let's break up. From now on, let's not see each other again. Chapter 13. My room wasn't big. Neither was my bed. Victor, with his tall frame and long legs, looked almost cramped lying on it, but he refused to leave. I felt bad for him. He was exhausted, so I offered to sleep on the couch instead. But Victor wouldn't allow it. Half asleep, a thought suddenly surfaced. I couldn't help but ask him, Victor, why were you always so distant with me before? Even after we slept together that night, though he had become gentler with me, I never once dared to think that he actually liked me. Because you kept getting back together with Martin. Victor pulled me closer, so I kept reminding myself to keep my distance. That night when you fell sick, when Martin ignored you, I thought you would finally leave him. But you didn't. Victor kissed me lightly, but his voice turned serious. Clara, I was so angry back then. I couldn't understand why you didn't take better care of yourself. I sighed. Honestly, I had already considered breaking up with him, but, ridiculous as it sounds, my birthday was coming up, and I didn't want to spend it alone. My father had passed away when I was little. Then, during university, my mother was gone too, opening this little private restaurant. It was my way of carrying on my father's legacy. He had been an incredible chef, leaving behind countless secret recipes. So after my mother passed, I used the inheritance they left me to open this place. But people without family, they always long for warmth. And on birthdays especially, you crave someone to spend the day with. I never imagined this birthday would turn out the way it did. But, in a way, it was a blessing in disguise. Because it brought me to Victor. I'm glad I met you that night. Victor didn't say anything. He just held me tighter. There aren't really coincidences in this world. There's just someone who keeps trying, quietly, tirelessly, to get closer to you. Victor had been frustrated with her. Frustrated that she never valued herself. Frustrated that she always let herself be hurt. But, more than anything, he ached for her. That night, years ago, when she had hidden away, crying alone, because it was her mother's death anniversary. She never knew, never realized how much she made people want to protect her. And the next day, she had forced a smile, laughing and joking with her classmates. She never knew how heartbreakingly adorable she was, how much she made people ache for her. On Christmas Eve, when she blushed, handing him an apple with the other freshman girls, he had been this close to falling. But back then, he had already finalized his plans to leave the country, and she was only 19. He had thought, I'll wait until she's older. I'll wait until I come back from abroad. So he had said nothing, but the apple she gave him, it was the only one he had accepted that night. He had kept it for a long, long time, until he had no choice but to throw it away. And yet, in the years that followed, she had poured her whole heart into another man. Victor had seen it all. Every moment of Clara and Martin's messy, on again, off again relationship. And so, he had always kept his distance, because he was afraid that if he wasn't careful, if he let her notice, she would push him away, completely, until her birthday that night, when she had said, "It's my birthday, I don't want to be alone." Somehow, as if fate had taken over, he had brought her home with him, and now, She was fast asleep in his arms. Victor leaned down, and ever so gently pressed a kiss to her forehead. He knew, for the rest of his life, he would never let her shed another tear.